For starters, when I became Auditor General, the department was sorely lacking in infrastructure for technology. We didn't even have scanners. So the department did not have a mobile device in the whole department. And so I immediately thought we had to fight to try to get more money for infrastructure so that we become more efficient with how we conduct our audits. So our liquor store audits have gone from over 260 days down to 60 days just by some of the changes we made. We have more of a work from home policy. So we have the auditor that lives closer to that liquor store, go with a scanner, scan everything, email it to the person writing the audit, and that person begins to immediately work on that audit from home. We didn't even have ability to email items from the field to managers. So we would literally be mailing with FedEx or what have you, the audit drafts back among managers. So we've completely cut that out. We also faced a very big challenge on funding. When Barbara Hafer was Auditor General, there was 906 employees. We're now down to around 480 just because of the way the funding changes are made. So we had to make a lot of these changes to try to make ourselves more efficient. So grappling with that, we also had a 1,500 audit backlog. But the change that we made, I think, have been, we didn't want to let go of any people. That was not a desire. But the efficiencies that we picked up on, we not only got rid of our backlog in audit, but we're being, I think, even more efficient in cranking out more audits. And the goal is also to have those audits have meaning. And the only way an audit can have meaning is if you get it done timely. What good are you doing a school district if you're getting them information 2 to 3 years late? So that was a priority. When I ran, I said I wanted to make a priority on getting as many dollars as available in these type budgets into the actual classroom. We wanted to examine what worked and what didn't in the economic development world to find out the better way that the state could be trying to create jobs, and also that we would find out with all the Marcellus shale drilling how effective we were being in protecting our water. The last two audits, the jobs audit since just launched yesterday, we're coming close to the end of the audit of the Department of Environmental Protection. The education audits will continue until I'm not audited, and they'll continue as long as there's a department of the Auditor General. Big picture, I think what really is critical, because I know it's been a big issue here, and Reading School District is not the only one, but there really is a crisis of education in Pennsylvania right now. Whether it be the funding issue, the debate about what the appropriate standards would be, how you fund the schools, whether it's property tax or other mixes of income sales. And a lot of that, I think, is coming to a head right now. And there's been Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid put on this problem. Reading is not the only example, although they were clearly extreme. When I say Reading, not the Reading area, but the Reading School District itself, on some of the major problems that we're seeing that are not just in urban settings across the state, but also rural and even some suburban. One of the bigger challenges that we're facing with that is, the charter school debate that is coming up, and some charters are good and some not so good. But how we fund the system is really putting an incredible strain on these local school boards, these local districts.
As a numbers guy, do you have a recommendation on how the system should be funded?
Well, we're going to have hearings. Meaning my department, we're going to have hearings in the spring on this issue all over the state. I think we've got to come to grips with what is the actual cost on a kid that's in a cyber school. Obviously, there'll be some flexibility depending on special needs in a charter school and in your traditional public. And then using that information to flow how the dollars are spent. Today, a kid in cyber who's, there's an effort to sort of recruit kids or target kids that are in areas where the bigger reimbursement will be. And even the governor said, well, part of the whole point of having someone go to a cyber school is it's supposed to be relatively equal cost-wise because they're all sitting at home on a computer. Well, we have wide variations on that. So the numbers just don't add up. But another part of this that doesn't add up is like these lease reimbursement issues that we're finding with some of the charter schools. Like the Chester Community Charter School, they got a $1.3 million improper lease reimbursement. Now, how does that happen? The person that owns the charter school sets up a foundation, sets up a board on the foundation, and is in a sense related to, not necessarily a family relation, but related to the entity that owns the charter school. Well, they're only supposed to get a lease reimbursement if they're separate. But we're finding, now we're talking in the millions of dollars all over the state that we found on charter schools that are getting reimbursed for a building that they essentially already own. They've set up a separate legal entity to own them, but they in a sense are getting reimbursed for something they already own. It would be, for example, if you owned this building, then created a foundation and transferred ownership to it, then applied to the state, if the foundation applied to the state for a lease reimbursement, but you had the same board. This is happening all over the state. So we've been calling that on it. We're actually hopefully going to be meeting with the Secretary of Education soon. She recently responded to us saying they know this is a problem, but they think they need more authority from the legislature to actually crack down on the issue. We also have seen in some charters potentially over identifying kids in special education. So a kid is from Reading School District. Then they go to the charter school, and all of a sudden there's this huge spike in special education, which drives more money to the child. Now, I can't tell you that they're all wrong, but when you see, you're not going to say if it's 10 students and it goes to 100, well, something tells me there's either under-reporting or under-identifying when they're in the Reading School District, or they're over-identifying when they're with the charter school. And that's happening, again, in many instances all over the state. And then the biggest hit to the school districts was when the state got rid of the charter reimbursement fund, which was a major hit on, I know, Reading, York, Lancaster, and a lot of urban districts all over the state.
But for those individuals that need special attention,
Right.
Isn't there an individual assessment or an IEP that is tied to that should follow through when they're going from one place to the other?
It follows through if they have that identification, and that obviously is appropriate. What we're seeing is that they get identified as that when they're in the charter school as well. And the question is, did the school district where they come from not identify them appropriately, and then they now are getting identified appropriately, or are they getting over-identified as a way to try to drive more dollars to the school district? Mm-hmm. I'm not here to tell you what the answer is, but we're seeing this spike happen all over the state, and the spike tends to happen in areas because the dollar amount is the same that gets driven to the school, but they tend to be identified in the areas where the least amount of extra attention is needed. So it's something we have to come to grips with, is what's the right answer, but I think we got to get in the weeds on that and figure that one out. But this is happening all over the state. The lease reimbursement, the loss of the charter school funding, the special education issue, it's happening all over the state. And so now with the state, having less money available for school districts, and the Act 1 property tax limits being imposed, that all those factors coming together is leading to tremendous financial pressures.
But much of this isn't going to be resolved until they address the pension issue, is it?
Well, it can be addressed separately or together. You can address the funding issue separately, but I think you're right on, they'll all have to be tackled together, at least in part. But it is a separate issue. When the governor says he's put more money into the schools these last couple of years, he's right. But most of that money has gone in to pay for the increase in the pension. So he's telling the truth. I mean, but it's not getting to the classroom. Mm-hmm. It will be the need to have really a frank discussion about what we're going to do on pensions, and both at the public school employee, the state employee, but what often gets lost is at the municipal level. There is significant need for reform at the municipal pension level as well. In fact, if anything, there's been less discussion, less reform on that issue than even what's happened at the state and public school employee side. But that's really an anchor on every city almost all over the state, and that is they are tied to pension deals from the 60s and 70s, mostly police and fire. And look, we all want our cops and firefighters funded appropriately, but on the same token, the cities that cut these deals didn't put money aside when the times were good, and now that you have these legacy costs for cities, and they're left with really some awful, awful choices. And that's happening again all over the state. And we're going to be putting together, we're meeting with all the entities that are impacted by this, and we want to try to put together an action plan on reforming municipal pension plans comprehensively the state, and at least put together that plan and try to thrust it into the middle of the debate when they talk about the state pensions, because I just think if they don't tackle it all at once, it'll be impossible. I think my concern is that they tackle the state and the school employee pension systems, don't tackle the municipal, and then the cities are going to be left to wander out in the wilderness again.
As long as we're on the education, I just want to stay with the Reading School District
Yeah.
for a minute. In your opinion, how bad a shape is it in?
Our audit of the Reading School District was as tough an audit that we had as any audit we've had all over the state. There were actually more findings, I think, than any other school district in the entire state. So if you want to just go by that, it's real bad.
Have you seen any improvement since?
We are, that echoes to a couple reforms that I've instituted since being Auditor General. We had typically done an audit of every school district once every 4 years. I have changed that mentality because I thought, what good does it do if we go in a school district, Reading, and there's others that are just in terrible shape, give that audit report, and then say, see you in 4 years. I thought, we have to find a way to drive the change that's needed. So Reading is one example of, we've now created basically 3 tiers, and one that's a high alert district, we're going to go back in much sooner to see if the recommendations that we put forward are being followed up. So we've released our audit in the spring of this year. We are already back in the Reading School District following up to see how they are doing on following through on the recommendations. Now, I can't report on those until the report's done, but we're already back in there, because I just think, what good would it be if it's 2017 and now I'm going to go back in again? I think and Reading isn't the only one. So the short answer is, in a short period of time, we're going to be able to tell you how they're doing on following up on the recommendations. But remember, some of this is financial. That does not mean we get to fix the language barrier issue, the dropout issue. A lot of this is how the school is operating financial, because I will tell you that if you don't have the financial background taken care of, it's going to be pretty hard to do some of the other issues as well.
Or the leadership issue, that's a problem there, and I know the Department of Education's concerned about it, but when you look at what's going on with that school board and the shift in, it has to be costing money every time they're changing
Every time
superintendents,
you change a superintendent,
and they're ready to do it again.
it always costs money. That's money that's not going to the classroom. It's money coming out of the taxpayers, well, whether it's property or the state money, or whether it's local money, it's still taxpayer money. And it is almost always a telltale sign. When there's a consistent turnover among superintendents, you almost don't even need to look at the test scores. It's almost always a sign that it's a school district that is doing poorly.
Without violating your ethics, can you tell us at least if you're pleased with what you're finding so far in your second look at the Reading School District?
I would say that the best way to phrase that is to say that we see some progress being made in some areas. But we are not seeing a dramatic turnaround at this point. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful. I know that's somewhat cryptic, and it's not intended to be. It's just within the areas of what I can and can't talk about. But I would say some progress in some areas is the best news I can give you right now. But when you have school board members that are overly involved in the day-to-day functions, when you have that much turnover at the top, you have a shrinking tax base, and then you have the challenges at the state level, and then you throw in the dynamics that happen on the ground. That Reading just is an incredibly diverse area, and there can be a strength to that, but it's also, there's challenges that go with that too. There is a lot of work that is going to be needed to turn this school district around, and I know that how important that is for the community of Reading, because and we were just meeting with the economic partnership, and how important it is for them to attract and maintain businesses that they have, and attract new ones and keep what they have. That the talent that's in that school district, that it be utilized so that it's actually an economic driver, and helping giving kids hope for the future as opposed to an anchor around sort of the economic growth of the whole region.
Speaking of Reading, moving from the schools, but just city redevelopment, the city's been successful in getting a lot of grants for some redevelopment in the last several months or so. Are you going to be looking at these grants and sort of how they're used to get a sense of it's being used properly or in the best way possible?
On the jobs audit, we're more looking at the programmatic side of what are we getting the bang for a buck for. It'll both be on jobs created and jobs retained. What are the clawback provisions for when companies go away? Do we have any ability to get some of that money back? Which programs are more effective at driving good wages? You know, I say that obviously there's a subjective term, but you know, I would take any wage right now for a lot of people would be good, but which ones are actually creating middle wage jobs? We're going to try to look at that. So the goal is to look. We will probably do some testing on the ground and spot check specific grants, but it's mostly looking at it from a programmatic side. If there's obviously any potential lead to of corruption happening on a grant, that's a whole different conversation. But it's mostly looking at which programs have the most success at creating jobs. Is it a job creation tax credit versus a KOZ zone, something? That's the debate that we'll be looking at. By the way, did you want to talk about Oley Valley at all? And this is another issue we've seen in areas. The big ticket item about that is the swap issue. And Oley Valley is one of the few that after they did determination, they went right back and did it again. Which, there's Jack Wagner, who's my predecessor, he came down on the side of they just really need to be eliminated, and that's why the legislature is actually considering that. So while that debate is happening, I'm trying to raise the alarm bell to ones that are considering it. Before you enter into these agreements, you got to really understand what you're getting into. We just saw this up in Scranton as well. These early termination fees are huge hits to the district, and that money's gone. When you put money into a school classroom, hire more teachers, it may work, it may not, but you at least get some value for that. The early termination fees, that's money that's just gone. The community just loses that money. And Oley Valley is an example of that. You're not getting that money back. That money is simply coming out of the taxpayers' pockets, going to some financial firm that managed a deal outside, and you're not going to see it again. And I think many times that happens because school boards don't understand the entire risk of what they're getting into. School board positions are tough jobs. They're unpaid, borderline part-time, but you end up having to put some instances full-time work into the part-time side of it. But that is such a risky, complicated transaction that doing that at one meeting a month is almost incredibly unfair. And so one of the things I think we're trying to do is by pointing these out and banging away, say, what good are you doing telling us that they already messed up on this $6 million plus early termination fee? Part of it is to try to put the wake-up call to other school districts. Here's what could happen if you go down this path and don't understand entirely what you're getting into.
So in layman's terms, what actually did Oley Valley do that was sort of where they dropped the ball? So they invested this money and then they canceled this, they did the early termination fee?
Well, it's not so much where they dropped the ball, it's I don't think they understand the risk of what they were getting into at the beginning. So you could really argue that when they dropped the ball was getting into the agreement without knowing entirely what they were getting into. I mean, in Scranton, when we called out the Scranton area school, or for the Scranton City School District for doing the same thing, the media hadn't even known that this was going on. So part of this also is to, wake the community up as to what's going on. Sometimes right underneath their nose. I mean, sometimes people will have a complaint about a salary at a school district employee, and that's understandable. But this was, you're talking significantly more than that, and a significantly bigger hit, money that's completely leaving the community, in many instances leaving the state.
How many districts do you see that happening in?
Since I've been Auditor General, it's only been a handful where we've seen this so far. I think we're starting to see some cutting back on it, but probably in a year I'll have more of a report to see if that's accurate or not. maybe a little bit too early to see if that trend is just a blip or actual.
You had talked about municipalities before, especially in connection with the pensions. Do you see a need for municipal mergers the way school districts merged 30, 40 years ago? Or is that something that is going to cause more problems than it would solve?
I would say, for starters, what I've advocated for is we have a Pennsylvania municipal retirement system that helps cover the administration side of the pensions. So it doesn't mean a municipality that has a fully funded pension would have to bail out one that has not been doing the right thing. But it helps consolidate the administrative costs. That's number one, and I've been advocating and will continue to advocate that more pensions take advantage of that system. So I think it can be helpful, again, in administrative costs. That helps drive a second part of this, which is right now way too many municipalities are anticipating unrealistic rates of return. Right now, the
For their pension plans?
For the pension plan.
Okay.
The Pennsylvania Employee Retirement Commission has regulations that allow up to, and we just met with them recently, so I'm not speaking out of school on this, up to 9% anticipated rate of return. Now, on this issue, I tend to be conservative. I'd rather anticipate 4% and get 7 or 8, as opposed to anticipate 8 and get 4 or 5. Too many municipalities are anticipating annual growth rates that are just not realistic in this economy. Again, every now and then, one has a good year, but you should be anticipating at best below average, and hopefully it gets better. What happens is you anticipate 7.5, 8, 9, and then that doesn't happen, and then it compounds the problem that already exists. So consolidate more the administrative side of it, and 2, change the regulations so that I think a municipality should only be allowed to anticipate, say 6%, roughly 5-6%. If they do better, that's great, but they should not be allowed to go any higher than that because it's not their money. I mean, it's the people that work there, and it's the taxpayer dollars. It's not their money. So those two things combined, I think, would be great starters. That to me are low-hanging fruit. That's low-hanging fruit. Now you go beyond that. There's a bill out there, I think Representative Calogero is one of the sponsors, on at least getting all police officers statewide pension, similar to
Teachers.
the teachers, yes. I think that bill has a lot of merit, and it also drives the municipalities that they have to do a better job of getting their system fully funded before you can opt in. Because I do get it, if you're from a community that's been doing the right thing, you're fully funded, I get why they wouldn't want to help bail out some of the ones that are only at 50 or 60% funded. So that bill not only creates a statewide system, but helps drive more municipalities to, before you get in, you've got to get to the fully funded, or I don't know if it's 90 or 100%. It's definitely over 90. But
Yeah, I
it's
think it was 90.
90 I thought was the number.
I think it was 90.
Yeah, I know it wasn't 100, but it was definitely a high number.
It was close. It was
Yeah.
to get them closer.
To get them the closer. So you have, again, the administrative stuff, reducing the anticipated rate of return, then, which I think those two are easy. Then you move to that, which is a little bit more of a heavy lift, but I think starts moving you in the right direction. And so I think, if you tackle those 3 issues, I think you haven't solved all the world's problems, but I think you've made tremendous progress without eliminating municipal lines and getting into a battle that I think, could it solve some problems? Could it create others? Yes, but it doesn't fix that core economic problem. It just doesn't, because unless you're fixing these long-term fiscal issues, that's never going to go anywhere. This allows you to fix some of those core issues without even getting into the political battle that would almost never end with some of these municipal lines.
We're already at the end of November, less than a year away from the midterms. What's happening next year? What do you see?
Other than that there'll be elections.
Yeah, other than
Yeah.
the fact that there will be elections.
I'll start off with this. In 2004, when President Bush was reelected, the media punditry and a lot of political observers said the Republicans then had elected themselves a permanent majority. Then in 2006, the Democrats won what many people decided was a permanent majority. Then in 2010, a lot of people decided that the Republicans had won what was a permanent majority. And my point on this is permanent majorities just aren't what they used to be. The Democrats had Congress for 40 years. I think what you're seeing right now, and I think it's very unpredictable what's going to happen next year. And the reason why it's unpredictable is who's going to win is that I think the public's had it with everybody. And I think with good reason.
In Pennsylvania, Republicans have been pretty much in control of everything but the governorship, certainly the House and the Senate, for a substantial period of time.
The House flipped from 2006 to 2010, although the Democrats made inroads in the Senate last year.
Are we going to see that continue, or is that going to?
I would. My prediction would be I think the Senate will be very competitive in the next couple cycles. I think you'll probably see the House Democrats pick up seats. I would find it hard to see them getting in the next cycle or two a majority unless something dramatic would change. I think we're going to see a very competitive governor's race next year. I mean, whoever the Democratic nominee is, it will be a very competitive race with Governor Corbett.
Any predictions on who that might be?
You mean who might be the nominee?
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you somebody it won't be, and it won't be me. So. I'll start off with that. There's a lot of registered
That's going to be the
Democrats.
next question.
Yeah, there are a lot of registered Democrats running for governor, and I may not be the best politician in the world, but I can usually foresee some of when people go down this path. So it's good to take at least one registered Democrat off the list. Two things. Number one, my wife would kill me. Kids are too young, and two is I think my job is to be the independent watchdog, and that's not to say that you never know what happens in the future. But I think for me to be the auditor of the governor in a sense and run against him, I think that so made a campaign commitment not to do it. My wife would kill me, and I don't think it's the right thing to do at this time anyway for the job I have.
Is there someone you especially would like to see, or that you?
I have not made an endorsement yet. Clearly, as a registered Democrat, I'll be voting in the primary. I haven't decided if I'd make a public endorsement at this point. And I don't even always control everyone in the House's vote, so I'm under. I know there's been.
Why should you be different from
No,
everybody else in the room?
I say that not to make light of it. I just say it. Sometimes political endorsements, I'm not sure, I mean, I'm not sure that people should be necessarily worried about how I'm voting when the curtain is closed anyway, meaning, you know, if someone finds some value of what my opinion is, you know, I may offer it, but at the end of the day, I know there's been a couple times my wife goes, "That's who you're voting for?" So, I mean, it's, I don't expect, you know, so I say that again, people are going to, I think, the message of the candidates, their qualifications, what they're focusing on, how good their commercials are, how good their campaign, that's going to go a lot more towards determining the Democratic nominee than what happens when the curtain closes and who I vote for. And I'm not doing that to make I mean, I may go public with it just to let people know as a statewide elected official what my thoughts are on it, but I also don't think that that will be determining who the nominee is. I have enough self-discipline to know I don't control that.